my pals. How are you this evening? It's Sunday night. Let's light a candle in the darkness, shall we? Whoa. There it is. Okay. Who's in the house? Remember how important it is to right away tell us what city are you tuning in from, or any comment. Say good evening. Just the fact that you comment and hit the like button or the love button tells Facebook this is an important podcast, this is an important class, this is an important video, this is something worth watching. There you go. Hit those buttons. I love those love buttons. And it signals to Facebook that something valuable is happening here, and so other people get a chance to see it. James Roth in the house from Indianapolis, Minneapolis in the house, Sarah from New York City, Kathy from Lancaster, Christo from Lubbock, Ivan from Las Vegas, Juan also from Lubbock. Hey, a couple of guys from Lubbock. Kathy from Lancaster, Lawrence Polonetsky is watching, Nancy from Chandler, Arizona. Maybe Deborah Goodman will tune in from Long Beach, who I just met in person today. It's so wonderful when I get to see people from our Accidental Talmudist community in person. And I was at an event down a little bit south in Stanton, California earlier today, a Bullets and Bagels breakfast, and that was a lot of fun. Avi Maslowski from Winnipeg, fantastic. John from Tampa, Florida. All right, we're going to be talking about Berachos 9. Why does that happen? I muted the computer. That's crazy. Hopefully we don't get interrupted too much by that. What was I saying? We're doing Berachos 9. So if you're tracking, if you'd like to read along, if you've got the Talmud with you, or you're going to find it on sefaria.org, it's Daf 9, page 9 of the first volume of the Talmud, volume Berachos. Okay, if you've got questions, put them in the comments. I'll try to keep an eye on it and then scroll back toward the end. But I got to keep my focus, right, as much as I can on what we're trying to say. So this is a really interesting page. The first half of what we're going to be talking tonight is a little bit about process, because it's so important to understand how the sages argue, how they analyze, how they interpret, and there's a real primer on that tonight. So we've been discussing since the beginning from what time and until what time we can say the evening Shema. And so the rabbis are going to argue with each other about what source they use, how they interpret the command in the Torah. And specifically this permissibility of saying it after midnight. There's a bit of a conflict on that. We know that we're saying the evening Shema, pretty much all agree, from the time that we can see 3 small stars in the sky. Until when may we say the evening or the nighttime Shema? And basically the disagreement is it until midnight or is it the whole night, right? Rabbi Gamliel and a few others say all night. The sages say until midnight. The question is, what is the reasoning? Why until midnight? Is it there a source that says until midnight, or is it that the rabbis are decreeing you should do it before midnight as a fence around the Torah, lest you go to sleep intending to just take a short sleep and then get up later and do it, but you sleep all night and miss it. And so basically, it is a fence around the Torah. So that means that if you are out all night, and there's a couple stories of people who go to a wedding and are drinking, the sons of Gamliel it happens to, and some other people it happens to, and they get in very late. So can they say it at 4 o'clock in the morning? And the answer is yes, they can. It would be better to say it before midnight. It would be more proper to say it before midnight. But if they are only able to say it between midnight and dawn, then they have fulfilled their obligation. The important thing is to say it before the sun comes up in the morning. So then the obligation to say the morning Shema kicks in. And a little bit later in the page, we're going to start a new Mishnah about from what time in the morning may we say the morning or the daytime Shema. But before we get to that, the rabbis note that there is a parallel between this commandment about saying the nighttime Shema up until midnight preferably, but all night if necessary, and some other commandments that are located in the night, that have to be done during the night, namely the commandment to eat the Passover offering, right? So you're familiar that now at Passover we have a Seder. And when we have this Seder, really what we're recreating is sort of the Seder, the order of, that's what Seder means, sort of the order of study and eating and what we do at Passover. But the original commandment in the Torah is that each year when we celebrate God redeeming us from slavery in Egypt, that we eat the Passover offering. Most offerings are offered on the altar and burned up, and as a sacrifice to God. The Passover offering gets slaughtered in a very specific way with a group of people signing up to eat that particular offering, and then that's the point. It gets eaten, right? It's not some offerings can be eaten by the priests, but this is an offering that's eaten by the people, right? And so the question is, when do we eat the offering? And it's a similar discussion of, well, we eat it at night, okay? So until when? Can we eat it all night? Or is it permissible to eat it at any time of the night? Or should we eat it before midnight? And it's a similar argument. It's not exactly the same. And what the sages key in on is sort of what are the periods of the Passover sacrifice. Basically, we want to slaughter it in the afternoon. And then do we try to eat it between when it's evening and midnight? And then we burn the remnants of it because we don't leave it over until the next day. Is there a problem?
There's no header.
Oy.
I would say just keep going, but there's no header.
Well, okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Even though I haven't described the show at all, you guys are great. After it finishes, I'll add in the description of what we're talking about during the show.
I can add it, I think, if you can write it and give it to me.
I'll just add it afterwards. Okay. It's so much to remember. Okay, guys. And so the question is, do we try to eat it between when the evening kicks in and midnight? Yes. Is it, have we fulfilled our obligation if we're eating it even later than that? Yes, but not preferable. And then the rabbis lay out this idea that, okay, well, if one rabbi, in this case, Eliezer, and there's a conflict between Akiva and Elazar ben Azariah, and then we're told that parallels a dispute between Eliezer and Yehoshua. What matters here, what I'm trying to get at is, and I'm not going to trace it out, you should read this page to start to see it, but the point is, if one rabbi says, okay, we interpret from the text that we have to finish the eating by midnight, and the other rabbi says, no, we have all night to do it. Okay, so what are their sources for that? And basically they're interpreting what the phrase "in your time of haste" means, right? So if you interpret it one day, what are the implications of that in other verses where time of haste and that interpretation applies? And for the other rabbi, what does it mean in other verses? What we're learning from this is when people have a dispute, when there's an argument, if you're going to use Talmudic reasoning, so then you're trying to get at, okay, what exactly are we disagreeing on? Do we just hate each other? We're going to disagree with each other no matter what we say? Or is there a particular point in our argument that is the source of our disagreement? Once we've identified what is the exact thing that we disagree on, then we say, okay, well, what are the implications of that disagreement? If we say like this, so what does it mean down the line? And in arguing about what time we should be eating the Passover sacrifice, what they're actually disagreeing on is when were we redeemed from Egypt? What was the time of our haste, right? We left Egypt in haste, right? We were redeemed in haste. We were like there for hundreds of years. And then finally when God said, okay, you're getting out, it was like overnight, we're out of there, right? And the question is, when did the redemption actually happen? Did it happen around midnight when God came in with the 10th plague and slew the firstborn of Egypt? Or did it happen the next day when the Jews actually left Egypt? That's what they're really disagreeing on. Was the redemption at the night when after that 10th plague, all the Egyptians said, get out. We don't want you here. It's too difficult. We understand. We should not have enslaved you. Your God is redeeming you. And as a matter of fact, because we're so guilty and feel guilty about having enslaved you for several hundred years, we're going to pay you for all the work that you did. And it's like, it's slavery reparations, right? The Egyptians gave the Jews who were leaving all kinds of silver and gold and said, please take it and go. So was that the moment of redemption in the middle of the night, or was it actually the next day when the sun broke and the Jews actually walked out of Egypt? And depending on which interpretation you're going with, it will have further implications down the line. And that is a very important exercise for us to understand that when we argue with people, we want to get at, okay, what exactly do we disagree about? And having isolated that, what are the implications of that disagreement? And in that way, we are able to assume that we're not disagreeing because we don't like each other. We're not disagreeing just to disagree. We disagree on a very specific thing, and we're both coming at it with good intentions. And it's always very important in disagreement, especially in political disagreements, that you assume the other person has good intent, and we get at, okay, what exactly do we disagree about? So that ends the section about the evening Shema, and then here we come to a new Mishnah, and the question is, from what time may we say the morning Shema? And this is very colorful, very interesting debate. So what time is morning, right? When does the day actually begin? And several definitions are offered. Remember, these are people without wristwatches, without even clocks. So how will they define that the day actually begins? Is it when there's the first streaks of light in the sky? Is it when you can see a sliver of sun coming over the horizon? It's none of those things. It's not an astrological sign, not like the evening where it's dependent on when we see 3 small stars in the sky. For our sages, the day begins and our obligation to recite the morning Shema begins 4 possibilities. Number 1 was when we can distinguish between, I don't have my talus here, it's in the other room. But when we can distinguish between Nina, if you're listening, please bring me my talus, which is on the counter over there. When we can distinguish between the blue thread of the tzitzis and the other white threads, right? So we have the ritual fringes. Right now, the one I'm wearing under my shirt has just all white fringes. But there's a commandment to put a thread of blue in the fringe on the corners of our garments. At some point, that blue became unavailable and it was largely lost from religious observance. Now, in the modern age, the blue thread is actually back. But in the ancient times, they would say, so it's when you can distinguish the blue from the white, right? So in the morning, it's dark. In the blackness, you can't distinguish blue from white. When there's enough light in the sky to distinguish the blue thread from the white thread, okay, then there's enough light for you to say the morning Shema. That suggestion is offered and rejected. So they go on with the definitions and they say, from when you can distinguish a dog from a wolf. Somebody else says, from when you can distinguish a donkey, a domesticated donkey, from a wild donkey. And finally, the definition that is accepted is when you can distinguish a friend from a stranger. Isn't that beautiful? What they're talking about is danger, right? Distinguishing a dog from a wolf, a domesticated donkey from a wild donkey. It's an animal that will not harm you to distinguish it from an animal that will harm you, right? And particularly a friend from a stranger. Most of us, thank God, we live in places where there's law and order. But if you're thinking about, especially in ancient times where, police aren't so readily available, and if you do get in trouble, God forbid, it's not like the cop cars can come with their sirens. People were on their own and they had to be careful. And they wouldn't set out on a journey until they could see the faces of people and understand who they were confronting. Then they would feel safe. And so I think it's a beautiful teaching, a beautiful metaphor that our day begins when we can distinguish the face of a friend from the face of a stranger. And finally, apropos of that teaching, we take a little digression and we learn at the end of this page, check this out. It is a mitzvah to see the face of a king, even if he's not your king, even if he's not a Jewish king. It is actually a commandment to see the face of a king, meaning in person, right? Not TV, right? Not in books, not in pictures. But if you have an opportunity to see the President of the United States in person, you do it, or the Prime Minister of Canada, the Prime Minister of England, the leader of a country. If you can see that person in person, then you're fulfilling a commandment. I did not know that. I'd been through this before and I forgot it. And when I read it today, it's like, wow, And I actually I happened to hear on the news today that, when the President of the United States, when Donald Trump has a rally, apparently a quarter of the people at those rallies are Democrats. I mean, he's a Republican, and you would think, okay, so all the people at his rally are Republicans. But no, a quarter of them are Democrats. Is it because they're changing sides, or they suddenly like him? Or maybe it's because they're fulfilling the commandment to see the face of a king, whether you like or disagree or whatever. I'm not talking about politics here, but just the act of seeing the face of the leader of a country is an obligation. Okay, that's our teaching for today. Some of the crucial highlights of page 9 in Berachos of the Talmud. And I would say that our takeaway, we covered a bunch of different things. What do people think? What would you say the takeaway of today is? What did you learn today that you're going to take with you? I really am attracted to this idea that the day begins when you can distinguish the face of a stranger from the face of a friend. And the idea that when we find ourselves in controversy, at odds with people, in an argument, right? Rather than assume that they're just wrong, or they don't care, or they have the wrong view because they haven't looked into us, because they're ignorant, because they're idiots, etc. Rather, maybe we agree on most things, but let's see if we can find the most specific thing that we disagree about, and then together trace out what are the implications of that specific disagreement. Christos says, thank you for your time tonight. So good to be learning Talmud Bavli from actual people and not just reading it. Amen. Amen. It is a commandment to learn with people and not alone, if possible. But we're doing it here. Okay, I really thank you for joining in. I apologize that the description of today's class was not in it when we started the show, and I appreciate that everybody tuned in anyway. All the best, my dear friends. So today I had hoped to come on at noon, and I said that last night, but the day got away from me, and that's just going to happen. My commitment is to do my daf every day and to go live every day, if humanly possible. And so I'll do it. I can't, make the specific time every day because life gets in the way, and it's just, I'm a dad. I have obligations to the kids, and things come up. But I will get on it every day, and that way, in case you miss it when it's live, you'll be able to see it the rest of the day. And that's been happening a lot. People, the number of views is doubling pretty much every day after live and before the next day. We've also got a playlist of all these videos. In case you missed it, you can find it there in the videos section of Accidental Talmudist. Somebody asked about turning this into a podcast. I think that's a great idea. We just have to find what that workflow is going to be so that we can get these recordings sort of into the queue so it can become a podcast. But I think that's a good idea, and it would be good to make that happen. All right. Thank you, Janice. You say we appreciate you anytime. Thank you so much. I really love this community, and I thank you for letting me be of service to this community. All the best.